The throttle twists, the engine roars, and the city falls behind me in a blur of lights. Every mile I cover feels like distance, not just from a place, but from a story that still burns. I never imagined I would tell my brother's story like this while cutting through traffic, feeling the weight of what happened settle in my chest, as if the motion of the bike is the only thing keeping me steady. When she told him that her parents considered him a step down from her ex and that she did not want to make them uncomfortable, my brother simply nodded, calmly, without argument. Without a scene, he packed his things and left while she was at her sister's wedding. A few hours later, her father called ours, confused and trying to understand what had happened. Watching all of this from the outside, I realized something painful. People rarely see that they are only a placeholder until the person they are being replaced by actually arrives. For 3 years, my brother believed he was the hero of Rebecca's story. He thought he was the man who came in after the storm, the one who repaired the cracks, rebuilt the foundation, and made her life feel safe and steady again. But looking back, I see the truth more clearly. He was not the hero. He was the contractor. And once the repairs were finished, she no longer needed the man with the toolbox. She wanted chaos and excitement, not peace. My brother met Rebecca when she was at her lowest point. She was 24, drowning in credit card debt and emotionally shattered after a turbulent 3-year relationship with a man named Derek. She used to describe Derek as a visionary, speaking about him with a kind of reverence, as if he were a misunderstood creative mind ahead of his time. But when you looked at his life clearly, there was nothing visionary about him at all. He was in his early 30s, chasing the image of a glamorous nightlife promoter, constantly talking about big plans, future ventures, and connections he supposedly had, yet never actually building anything solid or lasting. He lived on borrowed money, regularly taking loans from friends, acquaintances, and even strangers, with no intention of paying them back. His romantic life was just as reckless. He cheated repeatedly, treating loyalty as something optional rather than fundamental. Over time, he had shaped Rebecca's perception of herself so badly that she felt as if simply being allowed to stand beside him was some kind of privilege, as though she had to be grateful just to remain in his presence, orbiting around his chaos like a satellite around an unstable star. When he eventually left her for a much younger social media model, Rebecca completely fell apart. That was when my brother, Matthew, entered the picture. He worked as a systems analyst, the complete opposite of Derek. Steady, reliable, responsible. His bills were on automatic payment. He never vanished for days claiming to be networking in another state. When they started dating, she told him he was a breath of fresh air. She said she was done with drama, emotional whiplash, and toxicity. She wanted peace. And my brother gave her peace. He helped her organize her finances. He co-signed on her car refinancing so her predatory 19% interest rate dropped to something reasonable. When she decided to return to school to finish her marketing degree, he covered the full rent so she could focus on her studies. He was not just her boyfriend. He was the structure holding her life together. But there is a dangerous truth about peace. If someone is addicted to chaos, stability eventually starts to feel like boredom. About 8 months ago, everything shifted. Rebecca finished her degree and landed a solid job at a public relations firm. She started going to the gym, dressing with more confidence, and carrying herself differently. My brother was proud of her. He believed they were growing together. Then the comments began. At tea first, they were small. They would be watching a movie, and she would sigh that she wished they did things like that. When he reminded her they had just gone on a beach trip, she replied that it had been planned on a spreadsheet and therefore was not truly spontaneous. Then she started taking subtle shots at his job, saying he spent all day in front of screens and never built anything real. He tried to keep it light, explaining that he maintained networks that kept hospitals running, but she rolled her eyes and called it sterile. Everything came to a head during the week of her sister Nicole's wedding. This was a major event for her family. Old money, an exclusive country club, and a perfect image from start to finish. Rebecca was the maid of honor and obsessed with appearances. My brother assumed he was part of that polished image. He bought a tailored charcoal suit for $700, got a fresh haircut, and even had his car professionally detailed so they would look sharp together. The day before the wedding, he walked into the living room wearing the suit, expecting her reaction. She looked up from her phone without smiling and said it was fine and very him. When he asked what she meant, she implied that it looked too safe and ordinary, like what an accountant would wear. Later, when my brother tried to clarify what their plans actually were for the wedding day, she hesitated in a way that immediately felt wrong. The casual rhythm of their conversation just drained out of the room. After a long pause, she admitted that she had been on the phone with her mother earlier and that the topic of him had come up. She did not present it as a single remark, but rather as a collection of small, sharp observations her parents had been making over time. They had been reminiscing about Derek, speaking about him with a certain nostalgia, recalling his charm, his loud confidence, the way he could command a room without even trying. In comparison, they had framed my brother as the safer option, the reliable man who arrived after the storm rather than the one who created it. To them, he was less exciting, less magnetic, less memorable. And then she relayed the statement that clearly hurt him the most, that, in her parents' eyes, my brother was simply dull, dependable, yes, but painfully unremarkable beside a man like Derek. After that, she told him she did not want him to attend the wedding, claiming she was protecting him from their criticism. My brother was stunned. He pointed out that she was effectively uninviting him, but she defended herself, saying her mother would be drunk and judgmental and that she could not handle managing his insecurities on top of her maid of honor duties. In that moment, he saw everything clearly. He did not see a caring partner trying to shield him. He saw a woman ashamed of him. He calmly agreed, saying that if he was a downgrade, he did not belong there. She looked relieved. The next day, she left with her suitcase, saying she would stay at a hotel near the venue. My brother watched from the window as she got into a rideshare and noticed she was not alone. A man in a flashy leather jacket leaned out to help her with her bag, the kind of man who walks like he expects to be noticed. In that moment, my brother understood everything. She had not uninvited him to protect him. She had uninvited him because she was bringing someone else. His anger did not explode. It settled in cold and heavy. He looked around the apartment, the television he bought, the furniture he paid for, the internet he set up. For the first time in 3 years, the silence did not feel peaceful. It felt like a verdict. He whispered the word downgrade to the empty room. He went to the bedroom, pulled out his duffel bag, and started packing. He did not destroy anything. He did not cause a scene. That was what Derek would have done. My brother does not create chaos. He removes structure. He packed his clothes, toiletries, and important documents into 2 suitcases. He emptied the safe, taking his passport, birth certificate, and most of the emergency cash he had contributed. He carefully disconnected the 50-inch television he had bought for their anniversary, wrapped it up, and set it aside before placing his gaming console back into its box. He moved from room to room, collecting the smart speakers with the same calm, methodical focus. Finally, he reached the modem and router tucked in the corner of the living room, both registered in his name and paid for entirely by him, and unplugged them as well, neatly coiling the cords before slipping everything into his backpack. Within minutes, the apartment went from a smart home to a silent, offline space. The smart lights shut down. The thermostat stopped responding. The voice assistant went mute. Streaming services logged out. He placed his house key on the kitchen counter and left no note. As he later told me, a note suggests there is still something to argue about. Leaving the key means the conversation is finished. He took the elevator down to the parking garage, placed his suitcases in the trunk, and then pulled out onto the street, heading toward a downtown Grand Hyatt. After arriving, he went through the check-in process, took the elevator to his floor, and stepped into his room. For a moment, he just stood there, looking around, before finally lowering himself onto the edge of the bed, resting his forearms on his knees as the reality of everything settled in. It was 5:20 in the afternoon, right at the moment the wedding ceremony would have been starting. He ordered a bourbon from room service and waited. The silence in that room was heavy, but not crushing, more like the calm after diffusing a dangerous situation. At 8:25 in the evening, his phone buzzed. It was William, Rebecca's father. My brother let it ring 2 times, gathering himself, then answered. William sounded shaken and asked if he was all right and whether he was in the hospital. My brother replied that he was at a hotel and did not understand what he meant. William then said that Rebecca had told the family my brother had suffered some kind of seizure or heart episode right before leaving, but had insisted she still go to the wedding so she would not ruin her sister's day. My brother calmly stated that he was perfectly healthy. William was confused and asked why he was not at the wedding, and why Derek was sitting in his seat. My brother pretended to be shocked, then explained that Rebecca herself had uninvited him, saying her parents would be uncomfortable because he was boring compared to Derek. William exploded, calling Derek a slimy, worthless man who had borrowed $500 from him years ago and never paid it back. My brother then told him that he had moved out, packed his things during the ceremony, and that he would pay his portion of the lease for 2 more months but would not return. In the background, my brother could hear wedding music, laughter, and clinking glasses like a completely different world. William pleaded with him to come back, promising to deal with Rebecca, but my brother replied calmly that this was not stress, it was character. He was the only truly stable partner his daughter had ever been with. What she did was more than infidelity. She faced me directly and made it clear that I did not measure up to her family. Also, she could secretly bring her former boyfriend into the picture. He wished Nicole congratulations, ended the call, and turned his phone off for a full day. Sunday was quiet and peaceful. He slept late, went for a long run along the river, and ate a steak alone at the hotel bar while reading a book. For the first time this year, he was not worrying about Rebecca's anxiety, schedule, or validation. On Monday morning, when he finally turned his phone back on, it nearly vibrated off the desk. Dozens of missed calls and messages appeared, mostly from Rebecca. Her texts followed a predictable pattern: anger, denial, blame, then desperation. He archived the thread without replying and went to work. That evening, at 6:30, as he walked to his car in the parking garage, Rebecca was waiting for him, leaning against his driver's side door, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes. She accused him of blocking her, her voice sharp, defensive, almost automatic, the tone of someone used to being answered. He confirmed calmly that he had, without explanation, without justification, simply as a fact. She then demanded that he come home, insisting that everything had been nothing more than a misunderstanding. He did not raise his voice. Instead, he reminded her steadily that she had not only brought her ex to the wedding, but had also fabricated a story to her father about him having a seizure to explain his absence. For a moment, her anger cracked. She admitted that she had panicked and went on to describe, in a rush of words, how Derek had humiliated her at the wedding, how he had gotten drunk, flirted openly with relatives, made a spectacle of himself, and eventually left with one of the bridesmaids without even saying goodbye. She began to cry then, her composure slipping, and she begged him to return. She said she missed his steadiness, the way he made her feel safe, the quiet certainty of their life together. He stepped back, creating physical distance between them, and explained in a measured tone that she did not truly miss him. She missed the structure he provided, the rent being paid, the problems being handled, the stability that made her life easier. He told her that movers would come for the rest of his furniture on Saturday and added, almost matter-of-factly, that he had already transferred the utilities out of his name. When she screamed that she could not afford the apartment on her own, her voice echoing through the garage, he replied quietly that he had already taken care of her for long enough. For a brief second, there was only silence, heavy, unresolved, hanging between them. Then he got into his car and shut the door, the click of the lock sounding final. He pulled away slowly at first, leaving her standing alone in the dim, cavernous garage. As he merged onto the street, a classic rock song came on the radio, filling the cabin with steady, uncomplicated sound to him. It did not feel dramatic. It did not feel cruel. It did not sound boring. It sounded like freedom.